I've been thinking about absolutes lately. An absolute consists of anything in its entirety, a completeness, finality, fullness, or the extreme, taken to the ultimate limit. If something is absolute, there is no part of it left over. In an absolute monarchy, several of which still exist today, all power resides in the ruler. There is no law or form of government that limits or impinges on the power whatsoever. The absolute monarch is the sole source of power, justice, and recourse in that world. Their word is law. Anyone who questions that authority is either silenced, jailed, exiled, or otherwise eliminated. Purged, as they say. An absolute monarch rules absolutely. Absolute zero, or 0 degrees on the scale of Kelvin, is a negative 273.13 degrees Celsius, or a negative 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, there is no thermal registration, no heat energy, and the vibration of a particle is at a minimum. Scientists have come close to this temperature in experiments using lasers getting down to a billionth of a degree Kelvin. Some scientists have claimed that they have gone below absolute zero, but I think that if that's true, they were either mistaken or the precise calculation of absolute zero was off. It's been cold here lately. The temperature this morning was 12 degrees below zero. That's a blazing 447 degrees Kelvin. The coldest temperature ever observed in the natural world is thought to be 1 degree Kelvin in space. And the average temperature of the universe, no idea how they came up with this, but it's reported to be 2.73 degrees Kelvin, if anyone should ever ask. There is a corresponding calculation for the hottest possible temperature, an absolute limit, absolutely hot, called the Planck temperature, and it is 1.416786 times 10 to the 32nd power degrees Kelvin. This limit was chosen because it's at this point that conventional physics breaks down, so if something were hotter than that, there is no way we would know it at this time. Given that vast thermal range between 0 degrees Kelvin and the Planck temperature, it is amazing to contemplate the life-permitting narrow band of temperature on the surface of planet Earth. As far as our senses go in perceiving the world around us, we say that the absolute threshold is the smallest amount of a stimulus that a person can detect. I suspect that this would differ to some extent among individuals, each having their own absolute threshold. It is said that when you lose a sense like sight or hearing, the others become more acute. Moral absolutism is when things are believed to have a value, that is, considered to be true or good or bad, completely independent of any context or consequences. If you do something bad and it benefits your family, maybe even saves the lives of your children, that doesn't matter. You have still done something wrong. Moral relativism allows for some fluctuation based on those variables. Absolution, a term that seems to me to be related to all of this, is the forgiveness or the remission of sins. It is freely given and complete in its operation, which is a cleansing dependent only on the true repentance of the sinner, which must be, in its own way, also absolute. Martin Luther broke with the Catholic Church over this because he thought priests were taking money to perform this service, a practice he felt that corrupted the essential nature of the transaction, making it no longer absolute, but contingent on something as squalid as payment. Redemption, he was certain, cannot be bought or sold. So we have these classic absolutes, hot and cold, light and dark, full and empty. But we have other absolutes in which the difference, while remaining adamantly absolute and separate, does not seem so clear. I'm referring to categories such as winning and losing, true and false, good and bad, good and evil, and love and hate. While I agree that these are not only different, but absolutely different, polar opposites, the difference between them, the spectrum on which they lie at opposite ends, can be, at times, so infinitesimally small as to be virtually non-existent, which is a strange, I think, way to think about absolutes. There could be the case where even the most precise calculation would not be able to distinguish one from another. I find that a rather surprising observation to make about things that are absolutely apart, and it provokes some conclusions which are equally alarming. One of which would be to observe caution when dealing with such absolutes, or with anyone employing them. Their absolute certainty, their emphatic conviction, could be based on what a clinical investigator might call a false positive. Does that mean that the world is a very difficult place to understand, even when we think it's all so clear? Absolutely.